Welcome to another episode of Toot Your Own Horn, Music Matters. Today I am here with the fantastic, fabulous Antoine Clark. Hello, Antoine. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. It's good to be with you. Thank you.
So happy to have you and so excited to share your story with our audience. Where did it all begin?
Well, I grew up in rural Virginia, and my interest in music kind of started within my family. My father was a gospel, blues, rock guitarist, pianist, and he led a lot of church choirs and gospel men groups in our community. So I grew up around that, and I think my love of music really blossomed when I was in sixth grade, and decided I wanted to, kind of do what my father did, but not play the electric guitar, but but to play the clarinet.
How did the clarinet capture your attention?
You know, it's interesting. I remember being in fifth grade, and there was a girl on my bus. She would always bring this rectangular black case on. And I asked her one day, what is that? What is that? And she said, it's an instrument. It's a clarinet. So I saw it then. And then when I got to sixth grade, I hadn't signed up for band actually. A cousin of mine said, you should join band with me. So I registered maybe like 1 or 2 weeks late actually. And right at the start, I actually thought I might wanted to play the flute because it looked very shiny to me. And my family, we weren't of lots of means. So by the time I started in the band, they had checked out all the instruments, at least all the instruments that could be given to students. Um, and so there were no more flutes, but my band director said, you know, you might want to try the clarinet, but we don't have one, but you can start on alto clarinet. So really in sixth grade, I learned to play the alto clarinet first. And of course, I fell in love with the sound of the instrument. The dark, woody sound to me, that was like, okay, this is much better than the flute. So, so that's how it got started. And I just fell in love. I was one of those kids who um, would come home after school and I would practice every day about 30 minutes to, an hour before I did my chores and homework. And my father was a single father. So, it was on me and my two brothers to kind of do the chores around the house. So I immersed myself in that experience and yeah, it's just stuck with me.
You're telling me you learned to play on an alto clarinet beast.
Yes, yes, yes. Which you would think like, wow, is that too big for a sixth grader? But I remember lugging that thing onto the bus and putting it under the seat. It was a big blue LeBlanc alto clarinet. So, and then finally, my dad, actually a neighbor had a daughter who played clarinet, and it was an old clarinet. The moths had gotten to the pads, and my teacher said, well, you can play on this, but you really need to get something. And my father, before too long, we end up getting like a Vito um, plastic clarinet, and I think I did. So beginning in seventh grade, I was on the clarinet, and I rose really quickly to top of the section. I was always first chair clarinet. So maybe that alto helped me in some ways. I don't know. You use my air.
Did you get to play some solos or were you heard more or was it you weren't, how much could you hear the alto clarinet in your band?
Oh, well, no, I could. I mean, I think I was the only one. So I got to play, whatever part that was matching with other instruments. But yeah, I was in my own little world for a little bit on that instrument.
That's very cool. So you took off and you get into seventh grade and you're just still loving it. And so music's in your family and it's very obviously something that you're starting to enjoy. But what else were you good at? I'm sure a lot of stuff.
Well, music, I end up by the time I got into high school, I started experimenting with sports and with dance. I did a little bit of contemporary dance and ballet. But for the most part, my academics were very strong. Um, but yeah, pretty much it was music that was my biggest outlet.
Mhm. And so then what?
Um, I decided early on that I wanted to pursue music as a career, being a music educator.
Mhm.
And while I was like in senior year of high school, I connected with Virginia Commonwealth University is where I ended up doing my undergrad degree with Dr. Charles West. So I ended up going to VCU to study with him. And I remember telling Dr. West in my freshman year, I think I want to get a doctorate in clarinet. And I remember him telling me, well, let's just get through the undergrad degree first.
One thing at a time.
Yeah, I I've always been an ambitious kid. While in school, I also fell in love with conducting. I learned to play the clarinet, the flute, and the saxophone. I actually even studied composition. And then after finishing undergrad at VCU, I went to the University of Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, just do a master's in clarinet performance. And then after that, I went to study with Ted Owen in Detroit. There was a certificate in orchestral studies program at Wayne State University. And while I was there, I played in the Detroit Civic Orchestra, and I won a job playing principal clarinet of the Dearborn Symphony. But soon I realized that, this is great, but, I have a master's. I, I don't like this poverty thing I'm dealing with right now, and I went back to Virginia, and I knew I wanted to teach a middle school or high school before going off to a doctorate. So I did middle school choir and band and musical theater for 2 years before going to Ohio State to get a doctorate in 2005. And basically that's where my clarinet journey took me. And then, I evolved out of that after teaching college into another life, and I'll hold that. Yeah.
For just a minute, because there's a prevailing theme here about all of our participants is what is it about the creative sector? Why are we so underestimated when we are so industrious and so ambitious? Because we are usually a pretty smart lot. And we usually will achieve very high results, even if our industry doesn't allow it always to reflect. In your case, you've had lots of recognition and success, and that's amazing. But I think even when it doesn't come that way, I think that artists are still pretty exceptional compared to the general population workforce.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I tell my students this, especially when I get the question, when a student is deciding to maybe pursue music or some other discipline, there's always that extra pressure to go into something that maybe their family or society says, oh, you're going to make more money doing this. But I always get that question from students, like, how can I make this work? And I tell them, I said, we are in an industry where you can't throw a rock and have, there's a lawyer. There are many lawyers. There are many doctors and jobs to support those industries. You don't have 15, professional orchestras that can pay a livable wage in a city. So what I always say to my students is that the one thing I love about music is that it requires me to be industrious and entrepreneur, to have other skills to rely on to make not only the income side of things work, but just the artistic side of it, to create opportunities. You have to learn to network. I think, all too often society looks at our job and where we are as not being, we're entertainment, right? And that's all it's worth. But no, I think, being in this field has taught me to use so many more skills than maybe you would think in other industries. And if I didn't have that skill, I had to learn how to do it. I know we might touch on this, but I am now an administrator of an orchestra. I didn't go to school for arts and then admin, but running my own business, learning how to run a studio, make connections, all these things have translated in a way to make me stronger in what I do.
Absolutely. And the thing that's amazing about you is that anything you touch seems to turn to gold because you are so efficient at working it into being. And anybody listening, you are just a bright example of how to make things happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's totally true. And I want to encourage you because I want to get this on this podcast just because I'm going to stay after you about this. You recently opened a school and your school is flourishing. Tell us a little bit about your school.
Yeah. So last, oh wow, I can't believe it's been a year already. Last year, around probably June, I started to think about where my career was heading as a conductor. And I have great success as being a conductor. As you know, this is to try to get a job as a conductor is just as difficult as trying to play an instrument in the orchestra because there's usually only one conductor, and so, I was thinking about that and I was like, well, this is going well, but I'm getting to that point in my life that I feel like I want to feel settled. I want to feel like I'm not chasing another position or whatever. And I started to think about how can I help my community and how can I give back to my community in a way that will grow me as an artist and as an educator. And so, the idea came up when I saw a building only 2 blocks from my house that was for sale. And I toured the building and I said, I think I can make this a private studio business. And so I decided to put a bid on the building, closed on it in August, and then I led a 6-month renovation of the building myself, where I served as my own general contractor. So, my experience here in Central Ohio, in the Columbus area, has been as a woodwinds instructor. And while being a conductor, but also a college professor, I had really always, stuck to that first love of being a teacher, not just being an artist. And it really meant a lot to me to give back to the community a space which be really accessible to a lot of the high schools and middle schools and elementary school programs in the area.
Mhm. I think you and I share a love of teaching and a love of mentorship and learning. I think we have a strong thread of that in our background. And I don't know if it comes, I know you said you came from very humble beginnings. And while I didn't come from such humble beginnings, I had a very crazy parent that was not well, that forced me into being very early industrious and, as if I perhaps didn't have as much, right? And so I think personally that kind of setup, however it comes to you, sort of drives this not only desire to learn, but we learn the fastest through teaching. Once we learn something, if we can teach it to somebody else, we get better at it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And, I feel for me, as you mentioned, my humble beginnings, you know, music education really taught me how to problem solve. And that's one of the things I really stress in my teaching to my students. I said to them, I'm not just a clarinet teacher. I think I'm trying to teach you, not I think, I feel that I'm teaching you about life. Yeah. Because you someday will put down this instrument. Maybe you won't, but majority of my students are going to go into something else. And I hope that your time with me has taught you that you can look at, whatever challenge is before you, learn how to break it down and build it back up. Right. And for me, going through the music education process just really helped me to be organized about my life, how to plan for my life. Sometimes we don't always plan where we're going to go, but when you hit a milestone, those skills, those lessons I've learned from it have just been really invaluable.
For sure. Absolutely. And I also think the thing about the arts, which is different than some other professions, not all professions, because many of them have easy access, lifelong learning paths. Like some of them are just naturally, it's baked into whatever it is, right? But I think in ours, especially in spades, it underscores this endless learning because you're just never done. Like, never.
Yeah.
You mean- Right. I mean, your ego can get in the way and you can become all, consuming. But if you don't do that, there's just an endless bucket of learning, which means that when you go into the workforce that wants to, check out, be done, like get to 100 and stop, like just pass, it really makes us stand out in ways that make the arts worthwhile to pursue and make it remarkable to be a part of them.
Right. I agree. I agree. And I think that one thing that at least I know I enjoy about being an educator and a conductor, musician is that, we do this because we love people. We want to entertain them. We want to heal them. We want to give them things to make their lives feel much more complete. And I think,
Where does that
yes, go ahead.
from? Where does that come from? If you were going to say, why is it that is the basis for why we got involved? Unfortunately, because our industry is not doing enough community work, in my opinion, there is not enough of this kind of sentiment anymore because people are feeling hurt and wounded and, like there's not enough opportunity. But the truth is, which you're a living proof of, is that if you focus on your community and you focus on your skill set and you use your resources wisely, you can build an incredible local or global or US based business in that place.
Yeah, definitely. I would hope, I don't know where it comes from. I hope just from the heart, and that I think anyone who wants to play music really is about not just playing for themselves, but to give something that really makes people feel happy. At least that's my motivation as an artist. And and yeah, I agree. I think when it's connected to that community aspect, it's even much more fulfilling. So here in Worthington, Ohio, where I live, I never would have dreamed that I would have founded an orchestra that allows so many local artists to either play in the orchestra or solo with the orchestra or write music for the orchestra. And then on top of that, build a school where I can help a lot of my colleagues and fellow educators train their students. So, I feel like I don't want to use the word stumbled into this, but it definitely, I didn't see this happening. And I'm just thrilled that I have this piece of my life happening right here and giving back so much.
And isn't it true that the reason it feels like stumbling is because your ability to see clearly, because of your training and because of your discipline, allows you to see those opportunities? And what do you think about you or what about your learning helped you take risk? Was it watching your dad play a lot of gigs, or what was it that helped you decide you were going to take some risk? Because that's also something unusual about you. You'll step out and take a risk.
Right. Uh, You know, this is a very good question because as a teacher, I try to think about what are the innate skills of a student? What are the things that, as an educator, I have to hone in the student? And let me just go back to the innate. I think and this is not boasting about myself,
Mhm.
but I think I had just an innate drive to want better for myself. You know, I, like I said, I love my community back in Virginia. Um, and I don't want to get too personal here, but there were some things happening in my family with my older brothers, some life decisions that I saw from them that made me see like, okay, I don't want to go down that path. I want a better life. As a kid, I was always interested in science and math and music. And I just saw the world as a bigger place to explore. And I wanted to get out into that world. So I think that just innate drive and the imagination that I got from music just all came together, and I never let up off the gas pedal, and I never have really felt complete in the sense that I feel like I can always do more. I can always get back. I can always push myself to be better at what I do.
Mhm.
And I think that just innate drive is something that's helped me, keep going.
Well, if I lived in the Worthington area, I would want to take lessons from you and I would love to start a wind instrument with you. If someone was listening to this and just blown away by your story, whether they're close to you or not, what would you say to them to get them to play a wind instrument right now or try?
Yeah. Well, I would say that I would encourage anyone to start playing a wind instrument because of the fact that of the lessons you're going to learn from it. It's beautiful to make music, but let's say if you think you want to be a doctor someday, I think this is the perfect training to help you learn how to assimilate information, hold on to that information, and then in the most pressure filled moments in your life, have to deliver that information, like in a recital or a school band concert. So, I really, like I say, I go back to my philosophy of teaching that we do this as educators because we see the benefits that it can help students and for the rest of their lives, not just in the classroom in middle school or high school or elementary school. So, I would say, yes, have a love for music, but give it a try because it will help you in ways that you didn't think possible for maybe the things you might want to pursue in your life.
And it doesn't matter if you're 30, 40, 50, or 60 or 70, you can still think that flute is shiny and looks cool and you can pick it.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, I got to circle back to one thing because that was too good to lead right into that. But I have to ask you one more time because I believe you will eventually see how we can do this. I would love to get a repair shop somehow closely associated with what you're doing because I can help you grow even faster.
Yeah, I love the idea, and I think my space has the possibility for that. I have, one of the things I learned doing the building is so many codes, so many rules and regulations. So, but I do think I think that's a really good idea because one of the things that I often tell my parents right away is that the child's instrument is other than the teaching is the next biggest um, impediment or plus to them growing,
Right.
right? To them growing. So if they are playing on an instrument that is not, well taken care of or repair, it can affect their training. And having really good repairmen is it. We need that in our industry. I've worked with some wonderful people here in Columbus. There was a gentleman I used to rely a lot on. And unfortunately, he retired. I've also have gotten in touch with some people that Don Nathan. That I think he may have worked with you in some way or trained.
He
But
trains
yeah,
growth. Yeah.
yes, I love sending my students to him for clarinet work. So it is a really big need that we have in our industry to have good repairmen.
So I love to just plant a seed before I let you go so that you can think about, because you're so good at this. And I just want you to understand how I would be thinking about this because maybe I can help. Is that you need to identify a flute, a clarinet, and a saxophone person that would be willing to pay for their training on their own, unless you could razzmatazz a scholarship, being the amazing person you are, but without that pressure necessarily. They would pay for it on their own, and then level 1 and level 2 will get them competent enough to be able to do all the little stuff, all the lack of like professional big step up stuff. But then they will have that constant adjustment, like the chiropractor in the basement of the house, right? And they'll be able to book some work through you, but they'll also get other work. And just having the association will help both of you grow because they will get stronger and you will get the benefit and they will get more customers. And I've done this like a million times. Just yeah. So if you are up for that, that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would love to talk more about that for sure. And yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And I know you're really busy, so it's not so much about you doing, it's about someone else doing. But Antoine, I just love you to pieces, and I'm so grateful for your time today and so thankful for you recording with me. It's going to be weeks because we've got a whole bunch booked out. I will let you know when it drops. But
Sure, for sure. Thank you so much, Lisa. This was terrific. Thank you.
See you later.